Thank you for joining us, Rabbi Feder.
Sure.
The first question we have is, Gematria is one of the methods of Aggadic interpretation, but unfortunately has developed as a bad reputation as something that can easily be manipulated to prove any idea. In your introduction, you pointed out a famous Ibn Ezra, where he shows the danger of reading the Torah as conveying numbers. Can you tell our audience examples of how Gematrias can be misleading and give some thoughts about their proper place in Torah?
Sure. Great question. So it's a good time of year because this is the Parshios and Bereshis have a lot of Gematrios which come up, and the Parsha we were just reading today is if that famous Ibn Ezra you're talking about. There are actually two Ibn Ezras, but it's talking about one of the famous Gematrios everyone knows is in the Parsha when Avraham went to war with 318 men. So the pasuk Rashi says 318 men is actually not 318 men. It's a reference to Eliezer, because Eliezer was his servant, and the Gematria, if you add up the letters, Aleph for 1 and Lamed for 30, and so on, as you all know, how Gematria works. You break it up, it turns out the Gematria of Eliezer is 318. So Rashi says the 318 men that Avraham went to wage war against the kings was really just Eliezer, the one man. And the Ibn Ezra, on that one, he says, the Cheshbon Ha'osios Eliezer derech derash. The count of, when it says that's Eliezer, it means he's the 318. That's just a drasha. It's a manner of Josh. It's not meant to be interpreted literally. Because the Torah doesn't talk in Gematria. Now this is his phrase. They're interesting. Anyone who wants could take any name in the world and make it for good or for bad. Rak Hashem kimashmao. A name is like it's mashma, like it sounds. You can't just take a name and change things. Torah says words. It says 318. You can't just say, "Oh, that just means Eliezer." That's not Eliezer. So he's expressing the idea that people, and this is what I think happens a lot. People will take any word and you change it into a numerical value, kind of change it back into a different word, and then say, "Oh, that's what it really means." And that's what the Ibn Ezra is talking against. That's one Ibn Ezra. He also talks about, and what do you mean? How could it be? How could you take anything to mean anything? What does he mean by that? So there's another example which he talks about, and the Ramban also talks about this I think it's in Geras Hashmad or Geras Teman. Is basically it's also in this week's parsha. It says Lishmael. It says by Tomei Yishmael. It says Hine berachti Yosef b'meod meod. Very, very much. Hashem tells Avram that he's going to bless Yishmael very, very much. And the Gematria of b'meod meod is Muhammad. Muhammad, I think. So there's actually the Muslims who basically says, "Oh, you see, the Torah predicts the coming of the existence of Muhammad." So that's what the Ibn Ezra says. He talks about this. He says people who say that b'mod in this pasuk, this is the Ibn Ezra in Shmos 1:7. He says people who say that it's talking about Muhammad, because that's it. Well, he says, what are they going to do when the Torah says, "If Bnei Yisrael and the Bnei Yisrael was very plentiful and also b'mod, they grew very much." That's not talking about Muhammad. So if you say the word b'mod is a reference to Muhammad because that's by Yishmael, it doesn't work out over there. And then he says this strong statement. He says, "V'chalila she'yedaber hanavi b'gematria v'remizos." God forbid, heaven forbid, chalila, chas v'shalom, that the Navi or the Torah should talk in Gematrias and Ramizos. So he says that's not a way to interpret the Torah. The Torah writes a word. It says mod, it means a lot. It doesn't mean Muhammad. And another example like that is the famous false Mashiach, Shabtai Tzvi, actually figured out that the Gematria of Mashiach HaAmiti, 814, is the same as Shabtai Tzvi. So you can support a lot of different things with Gematria, and that's kind of the point. Is that I think that's what the Ibn Ezra means, that a person who wants, he can make up anything. There's a person's creative enough, and nowadays there's websites, and if you want to twist things, and you could come up with whatever message you want, and then just put it into a Gematria. So that's kind of what's out there.
I believe the same would also go for Bible codes, correct?
Yes, that's another question. I'm a mathematician actually, and I haven't really researched the Bible codes, but my sense is, I know there's a lot of debate amongst mathematicians whether statistically it's legit. Could you really, is it statistically significant, as they say? And I don't know. I've never really been convinced, but I haven't really looked into it in depth. But good question.
I think it's been debunked, and the Cure of movements, thankfully, have kind of moved from it, because you can. They've proved you can do it with like Moby Dick and like Shakespeare.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. So again, I'm not holding in the mathematics of it, but that's that's my sense. But it's a bit, there's debates amongst, it's hard to get to the bottom of these things.
Yeah, recently, like a few years ago, I was seeing people sending around like Donald Trump, like
Right.
is yeah, but it's like it's so silly. It's like they could spell it in so many different ways. Like Donald Trump, add an olive in there.
Yeah, right.
Or
That
like
kind
they'll
of thing.
do like they'll do
Right,
that
exactly.
stuff.
Right.
And
So
it
it's
wouldn't make
interesting.
sense with Mashiach anyway. But anyway.
Yeah. So there's a Ramban. There's a famous Ramban. I don't know how famous it is, but it's a Ramban in Sefer Geula. And he says, I'm going to read it to you in English, but he says a really interesting thing because Ramban is referencing some Gematrias. And he says like this: perhaps a person will oppose me. This is Sefer Geula Shar Aleph. Perhaps a person will oppose me for relying on the calculations of the letters, which we refer to as Gematria. Such calculations will seem to him to be vanity and emptiness, since the person can derive bad and strange ideas from many verses using this method. Right? That's the Ramban saying. We will respond to the one who asks about this matter in accordance with the truth, namely, that no man is permitted to apply his own gematria calculation and to derive any notion that occurs to his mind. Rather, there's a received tradition which has been passed down by our rabbis, the holy sages of the Talmud of blessed memory, that certain known gematrias were transmitted to Moshe at Sinai in order to serve as a mnemonic device and an allusion, like I think he says, a remez, v'os, for matters which were given orally, along with the rest of the oral Torah, some in the realm of Aggadah and others in the realm of permitted and prohibited. Yeah. So basically, the Ramban is saying that don't blame me for gematrias. He's saying gematrias there's a Mesorah and certain gematrias from Chazal, from Sinai, and a person's not allowed to just make up his own gematrias, the Ramban is saying, but the gematrias which he cites and which are in Chazal are from Mesorah. They're a remez, they're a os, they're bringing to mind certain ideas. And that's what he's, talking, I think, against. I think that there's a difference when, on the one hand, gematria is a topic which is maybe misused at times, and anybody on his own makes up. Obviously, Shabtai Tzvi and Muhammad are misuses of it, but at the same time, they are in Chazal, and there's a Mesorah. They're part of our Mesorah, as you mentioned earlier. It's a derech drash. It's one of the methods of drash. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Kufos of gematrios, parparos chachma." The equinoxes and gematrios are desserts of wisdom. Now, you can't go through the Rashis, and especially in Bereshis, there's so many times Rashi's referencing gematrias. You go to Gemara's talking about it. It's part of our Mesorah, but that doesn't mean anything goes. And that's kind of, there's two sides of gematria.
You're taking a middle ground approach in a way.
Exactly. That's why I think it's like there's people who are gematria skeptics and they throw it out and they reject it, but at the same time, you can't just throw it out. It's part of Torah. So at the same time, it's hard to embrace it because it kind of sounds like, how do you differentiate? And that's kind of what I try to do.
It's pointing to certain truths, like just like Midrash is pointing to certain truths, and we don't have to accept all of them, right? But doesn't mean you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like,
well, yeah,
but
I'm not trying to not accept it. I want to try to understand.
Yes.
Right.
In general, that's my attitude towards Chazal. Is I'm assuming Chazal are great minds, and my goal and my goal in general in learning is try to uncover what they're teaching me.
Right. So I think that part of what has transpired over the years, and I understand what you're saying, Gematria properly understood and recognized as part of a tradition in Chazal is worth uncovering and trying to understand and trying to analyze. However, what has transpired over the years, even taking away made up gematrias, which is a separate point, but even within existing gematrias, to a certain extent, it has taken almost a mystical connotation.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That people are looking at gematrias and they're looking at it more than what it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? It's become it's taken a life of its own.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
yes.
that's a problem.
Yes.
You know
right.
I mean?
We need some Judaism demystified.
No, so but I 100% understand, and I'm looking forward throughout this podcast to get a healthy understanding of Gematria, which should hopefully dispel the more larger than life type of Gematrias that is,
Okay. Exactly. That's why I wrote it. That's why it just came out of the book. This is the point of the book called Gematria Refigured. So we're going to refigure it and try to come up with a new way of looking at it, which is, I think, in line with the Masorah and with the Chazal.
And that's why we wanted to have you on,
Amazing.
because what we do on this podcast, we're not trying to like just dispel all notions and throw out ideas of Judaism. We want to just have people have a healthier understanding of
Yes.
of the actual Masorah, and not just superimpose our own or project our own beliefs onto mitzvot, but
Yes.
rather we should understand what they really mean.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay, so you want to go with the second?
Sure. So, as a respected mathematician and a critical thinking rabbi, what led you to write a book about such a malign topic?
Okay, great. Good question. So my background, I'm a Rebbe and I'm a mathematician. I'm a Rebbe at Yeshiva B'nai Torah, Rabbi Chetz Yeshiva in Far Rockaway. I'm a mathematician, study graph theory. I'm a professor in Kingsborough Community College, which is part of CUNY. And in my training, when I was a young man, in my 20s, I was jointly studying, I was in a PhD program for mathematics. I was studying for Smicha in Yeshiva B'nai Torah. And when I told people what I was doing, the question I'd always get this excited question: you must love Gematria. Either that or Torah codes. It was Gematria or Torah codes. And I was like, whatever. Yeah, not exactly. You know, like, I don't know, it was like an uncomfortable question because it just feels like such like a shidduch, you know? Gematria, PhD, math, Torah. And I just never quite, it didn't sit well with me. And the basic idea was like, my experience in learning Torah is an experience of seeing the beauty of the ideas of the Torah, the insights, the pearls of wisdom. Torah came alive. My Rebbeim taught me, Rabbi Chet, Rabbi Man, they taught me the beauty of Torah. They showed me how Torah is relevant to our lives, how we could learn lessons about the Chumash, about halacha, about how to live, about everything, about ethics from Torah. And the experience of Talmud Torah was this very intellectual, enjoyable experience of seeing the pearls of wisdom that Chazal were trying to convey to us. And to me, and that's on one side. And math, on the same time, was a very rigorous discipline, which involved, again, my PhD was in group theory, in something called braid groups. And then I do research in something called graph theory. And these are rigorous, they're abstract, and they're much more than just basic arithmetic. So from my take, when I saw Gematrias, again, this was in my younger years, when I used to be a Gematria skeptic, if you will, as probably many of your listeners are. And the book is basically telling my story of my transformation from being a Gematria skeptic to being a Gematria lover, but a certain way of looking at Gematria. But basically, at the time, Gematria didn't talk to me. The way Gematria is often presented was not beautiful Torah ideas, insightful Torah ideas and wisdom. They were not pearls of wisdom that I was used to, nor was it beautiful mathematics. It's just plus, right? I mean, it's nothing rigorous in terms of mathematics. So people think you must love Gematria. It just didn't talk to me, to either part of me. And I was studying, again, I was pursuing my paths of Torah and of mathematics, and it didn't talk to me. And that was kind of where I was at for many years. And then you're asking, so what got me to write this book? Well, so then let me tell you a little bit. So then this was my attitude. I just always kind of had this negative attitude toward Gematria because of this. It just didn't talk to me. But again, I knew in the back of my mind, you can't have a negative attitude to something in Torah. It's like Torah is Me'ashem, it's from Masorah, there's Chazal. It's not an option in my mind to just say, oh, I don't hold by Gematrias. I think it's whatever. It's part of Torah. So it must be there's something deeper. Well, what is it? So once I was fortunate to do a Rashi, which is actually, it's in Parshas Chayei Sarah, and I'll tell you about it. But basically, I was fortunate to have some insight into it, into understanding the lesson that the Gematria was teaching, and it was an opening to a window to how to learn Gematrias, and the window was opened a little bit, and it took many years later till I truly got more insight into it. But I'll tell you a little bit about that Gematria. So the pasuk is in the beginning of Chayei Sarah. It says, Avraham Zakein Baba Yamim. Avraham was old age. Hashem berachas Avraham bakal, and Hashem blessed Avraham with everything, bakal, with everything, in everything, with everything. What does it mean? Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. So the Ibn Ezra says It means his length of days, honor, wealth, children. This is everything that a person desires, right? Avram had everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Ramban also learns that way, right? That's what it sounds like, right? If you think about it, he was wealthy, all the stuff, beautiful wife and children, right? But Rashi says, Bakol in Gematria, Bez Chaf Lamed, 52, is the same Gematria as Ben, a son. And since he had a son, Yitzchak, now this is the introduction to Chayei Sarah, which is about Abraham sending Eliezer to find the wife for Yitzchak, and this is the introduction. Hashem blessed Abraham with everything means with a son, and that's the introduction to the parsha where Abraham is going to find the wife for the son. Okay, so again, he's taking the word bakal, which means everything. The pshat of the pasuk is definitely saying Hashem blessed Abraham with everything. And Rashi is doing, and this bothered me at the time. What's he doing? He's taking a word, which again, Ramban, Ibn Ezra, the pshat of the pasuk is saying everything. Why limit it to one thing? To say Bakal means a son. That's not what that means. It means everything's everything. And the Birkas Hashem it's like denying the Birkas Hashem, which Hashem gave Avram tons of things. And just say one thing, to me, it was striking. And I thought about it, and I after pondering the Rashi, I thought of an idea, and the thought was as follows: if I were to tell you, we could try this on you guys. If I'd say, I'm going to give you, you can think of a genie comes and tells you, I'm going to give you everything. Okay, make a list. Make a list of everything you want. Okay, start writing. Imagine this thought experiment, right? You start writing on your list, and you fill it out. And maybe you spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know how long you're at. And then you say, okay, you good? Is that everything? This is it. One time, everything? You say, well, I don't know. Not quite everything. I think I get a few more things, right? And if you think about it, I don't think a person is going to feel comfortable ever by saying, that's everything. The person never feels, who says I have everything? A person, as the pasuk says, "Ohev kasef lo yispa kasef." A person who loves money never is satisfied with money. Person Chazal say a person has $100, he wants without 200. It's 200, he wants 400. So it's like a person never says, "I have everything." Everything is this unattainable word. How could we ever say, "I have everything"? It's infinite, right? Bakal is infinite, but yet the Torah is telling us Hashem berachos Avraham bakal. He gave him everything. So it seems somehow this word, which sounds like this infinite thing, which is impossible. Esav said, Yesh li Rav, I have a lot. But Yaakov said, Yesh li Kal, I have everything. So it seems like Avraham is able to have Bakal. And there's a Ramban actually, which says that when Avraham died, it says, this is in Bereshis Chav Cheches, it says, Vayegva vayamas Avram b'seva tova zakin v'saveya. He died old and satisfied. So he died satisfied. And Rashi, the Ramban says, he says that he had all of his heart's desires satisfied. He was full with all the good. And he says that's the way it is with the tzaddik. And he says David Melech was also like that as a pasuk. And the Ramban says it's a sipur. It's telling us the chaste Hashem b'tzaddikim, that the chesed Hashem that he gives them that, umida tove b'hem, and the great midah which tzaddikim have, shelo yisavu b'mosros. They don't have a taiva, a desire for luxuries, for extravagances. And he says, as opposed to other people, and he quotes that pasuk, Oev Kesef L'Yispa Kesef, and the Chazal, person who loves money is never satisfied. He says, Chazal say a person never dies with half of his taiva satisfied. He has 100, he wants 200. He has 200, he wants 400. So he says, but the midah tova of tzaddikim is shelo yisavu b'mosros. They don't want extravagances. And I think the insight is that an average person, us, we don't differentiate carefully between our needs and our wants. And our needs are limited. We could think about what we really need in our life to give us the good life which they're trying to attain. Our wants are endless. That list keeps on going and going and going. And if we think we're done with it, once we get all those things, it keeps going more. And it's an endless list. And people they're these avu b'mosros. They always want luxuries. They always want more. And they look at the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. They don't truly assess what is important in life. What do they really want? But it's tzaddik, like Avraham, like Yaakov, like David HaMelech, are people who are able to assess their lives, to think, what's truly important in life. And for a person like Avraham Avinu, what was important to him was to pass on his legacy, the ideas which he discovered, to the next generation, to build the nation which we are fortunate to be a part of. And he knew in order to do that, he wasn't going to work with Ben Meshach Beis Yehuda Meshach Eliezer, with his servant, who was a servant. He was an Eved, and Chazal say Eved is like cursed in people's eyes. It's not going to work. He knew he had to have his own son. And that was the one thing he wanted. That's what he needed. To be satisfied in life, he needed a son. So yes, Hashem gave him lots of things. But don't think that's what that Avram needed those things to be happy. For Avram to be happy, they helped in his mission. But ultimately, the one thing Avram needed was a son. That was essential. That was a need. He had a lot of money, but he didn't need a lot of money. He needed a son in order to pass on the mission, to carry on the nation, which the ideas that he wanted to pass down. He knew he needed a son. So so I don't think Rashi is denying the plain shot of the pasuk. Hashem berach Avram Bakol. He did bless him with many, many, many things, as the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban are saying. But Rashi and Chazal want you to say that don't think Abraham was like this taiva guy who loved looking for all his wealth and all these things, and that was what made him tick. On the contrary, in Abraham's mind, Bakal, what was Bakal? What was everything? It was merely a son. That's it.
Beautiful.
Now, to elaborate, now you might ask, okay, great. But now I've thought there's a further step. And this is what I thought was really the nice idea, is that why use Gematria to teach us this? Okay, you could say this idea, but why specifically?
I was literally just thinking about this right now as you were going on.
Yeah, okay, good. Why specifically use Gematria? Is it just another way to reference an idea? And that's what I think I used to think. I used to think Gematrias are like a lot of Chazals, and they just use these allegories or these things to teach ideas, and that's great. If we'd stop here, it is great. You see a nice idea, how to live your life. It teaches us, gives us food for thought, lets us think into our lives and assess our wants and our needs, and we can learn a lesson from this Rashi right here. But is there some significance of the fact that specifically is using Gematria?
I think that the point that you were making, the point you were making with this Gematria would be very hard to express.
Okay.
It's almost not, you can't get to it unless you can bring both the word everything and hide the
focal point.
The focal point of the sun, so that then you got to kind of make that connection, because I'm not sure that you can actually say that out.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's, you could say that. I agree with that, but I think even deeper. So the word bakal, and this is what's interesting about Gematria. What's strange about Gematria, we're all familiar with it, so we don't think about it. But it's taking and this is, I think, what used to bother me about Gematria also. It's like, this is what the Ibn Ezra meant, I think. He says, is that the words, Hashem kemashma'o, words have meanings, right? We study words, we're derash words, we learn them, we think about them. Words are vehicles of expressing content and meaning. And to take a word and to make it into a number, to take its letters, break it down, change them into their numbers, mix them up, add them together, take another word, and it's just like, why are you doing that to a word? It's like, how does it, what you're doing is you're taking a word and you're converting it into a number, into a quantity, right? Now, why is he doing that? So the word bakal is a word which, what's the meaning of bakal is all, is everything. And as we described for average person, how much is bakal? It's infinite. It's unquantifiable. It keeps on going and going and going. But for Avram, what is bakal? It's not infinite. It's finite. It's quantifiable. It's just 52. So by making it, using Gematria and putting it a number, it's directing our attention to quantity. It's specifically using Gematria because Gematria is a numeric quantitative method. And the reason it's using a quantitative method is to show us that's the idea. It's pointing us to the idea. Think about Bakal, which is infinite, and it doesn't have a quantity. It keeps on going and going. For Avraham, it's Bakal, it's 52, it's a son. So the Gematria is actually directing our attention, not just to a nice idea, but a very specific type of an idea, which is one which involves the quantity.
I'm interested in more examples of this.
Yeah, I know.
So
was I. This was me 20 years ago.
Okay.
I had this little Dvar Torah. This is exactly the response I got. I used to, this is my pocket Dvar Torah. I carried around. Anyone ever said, oh, does anyone have a Dvar Torah? I'd be like, me. And this is the Dvar Torah I used to say. It was especially good this time of year, Chayesara, but it's like everyone's always, wow, that's great. And that's the question everyone would always ask me, exactly what you're saying, Bensi. Could you do this in other ones? this is interesting. And I was like, I don't know, I'm not really sure, but maybe, you know. And this was like my state of mind for 15 years or something like that, you know, is in the mulling in the back of my mind. I wonder if this is just one interesting thing, or is this always the case? And I didn't know. And then it was about 5 years ago. I don't remember exactly the one, but basically I started, I don't remember how I revisited it, but I decided to revisit this. Somehow I brought it up. And then I started like working. I said, you know what, I'm going to try to work on others. And like, because I think I thought of it in the back of my mind all the time, and it never worked. Like it never worked. It was like a nice idea, but it was a nice theory that it could always be done, but it never worked. And I think like I discovered that I was forcing it, and I was going about it wrong. And what I mean is like I was always just trying to see a Gematrias and trying to do the same exact thing, and it doesn't work. In my experience, it doesn't work. It's like forcing an idea. You just can't do that. I don't know, it's not the way ideas work. You can't just force that type of thing. But my experience was I decided to, I don't know how I did, but I decided to like learn the parsha in which a gematria came up on its own. Try to just probe the ideas like I was used to. I have experience, and my Rabbeim taught me how to analyze a piece of Chumash, how to analyze a story, an area, whatever, and just try to ask questions, learn through it. Forget the fact that it's using gematria, like we talked about here. But Kol, we didn't get to the gematria until the very end, if you noticed, right? Until it was all nice and well, even before we even came to gematria. So forget the gematria part. Learn the area, try to gain insight into it naturally, and then at the end, see what happens. See if we could see where is maybe there's something to do with the Torah emphasizing Chazal, emphasizing something significant about quantity, and and I started doing it, and it started working. So let me give you one example now, just off the cuff, and then maybe with time we'll hopefully discuss some more. But just see, here's the problem: is like I can't rattle off 5-10 examples. Though you can read the book, they call it Gematria Refigured. This will basically each chapter is another example, but see, it's not like just quick ideas. That's what I was looking for, but it doesn't work. It's not the way to get the ideas. You really got to learn through the areas. And that's what I thought was interesting about it in the book is like, I'm not just giving you a list of 100 Gematrias and here's the idea. I'm giving you 10 or 15 and learning through the areas and gaining insight into what the story is about, what the mitzvah is about, and then seeing where the Gematria fits in at the end. So I'll give you one quick example, which I don't talk about much in my book. It's just like a good, I think, quick example. And then hopefully we'll probe some more in a little bit more depth. So just to get an example. So the Torah in Dvarim, it's the laning actually on Tisha B'Av. Okay, so it's a sad laning. Ki solid banu of nevanim. It's predicting basically the galus. And it says when you're going to have offspring and you're going to get v'noshantem ba'aretz, you're going to get old in the land. You're going to be in the land for a long time, and you're going to become corrupt, and you're going to worship avodah zarah, and you're going to do that which is evil in the eyes of Hashem. Hashem says, I testify to you today, the heaven and the earth, that you're going to perish. You're going to be destroyed quickly from the land. You're not going to live in there, but you're going to be destroyed. Terrible, threat, warning against us. And it's sad. This is what we read on Tisha B'Av. Okay, so but the pasuk says when you have kids, v'noshantem ba'aretz, you're going to be in the land for a long time. So Rashi on that pasuk says it's a hint that they're going to go to Galus at the end of 852 years. The gematria of v'noshantem, trust me on this, trust Chazal on this, is 852. That's what they're going to go to Galus. But and the pasuk says that you're going to be in Galus 852 years. You're going to go to Galus, and then you're going to be destroyed. Right? You can be in the land. I'm sorry, you can be in the land for 852 years, and then you're going to Galus, and you're going to be destroyed. But it says, Rashi says, but Hashem exiled us earlier at the end of 850 years, 2 years early, so that the next pasuk wouldn't apply. Because the pasuk says you're going to go into Galus after 852 years, and then we're going to destroy you. But the Chesed Hashem was, he did it 2 years early, so this way he'd end up destroying us. If he would have done 852, then the rest of the pasuk would have to come true that he would destroy us. But it was Chesed Hashem, Yerachmim on us, that he didn't let it get to the full amount of Noshantem. It was 2 years earlier, and therefore we ended up not having to be destroyed. So it's hard to make heads or tails of that. What's the point, right? What's the gematria? What's the point? What does it, So I think it means that we oftentimes think about evil as like a qualitative idea. He's an evil guy. The Jews became sinful, evil, Risha'im, right? It's either like we have these like ideas, the good guy and the bad guy, and they're just these qualitative ideas. But I think Chazal are teaching us evil is very much a matter of quantity. How evil are you? If a person is evil for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, it devolves and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And it keeps going. And the pasuk is saying is that you're going to be 852 years. They're not all evil years. They're started off good, but it's basically saying at the end of 52 years, you're going to be there for a long time in Oshantam Ba'aretz. And it's going to keep building and building and building. And the evil is going to come to a breaking point where they're basically the only fate which they're going to have is destruction. And that's the pasuk is predicting. But that's the path which the Torah is predicting. But the Chesed Hashem was that he stopped it 2 years early, which means before they got to the nth degree of evil, the 852nd degree of evil, he stopped it 2 years early as a chesed, and now they don't necessarily merit destruction. Now they're returnable. We're capable. There was a churban, as Chazal say in Tisha B'Av. Hashem took out his anger on the eitzim avanim, on the stone sticks and the wooden stones, and not on the people. So there is a way back. So what it's showing us is that idea about the way we had a path back and the Rachmanim of Hashem, but it's highlighting the idea is that this concept through using Gematria, it's showing us that Hashem's din there's quantity in Hashem's din. Hashem measures din. As we say, like we said, the Midah of Tova is 500 times more than that of Roshos. He punishes 4 generations for Hashem, 2,000 generations for Tzaddikim. There's quantity in Hashem's judgment. And here it's saying is, there's calculated. Hashem is, so to speak, calculating. And there's 852 years is a difference of 850 years. And that's the idea of like, it's showing us quantity in Hashem's din. And you have that also in next week Parsha, also by same thing, which is I talk about more at length in the book, remember the cities of Sodom, there were 5 cities that were going to get turned over, but one of them was saved. And that was Tzoar. Because Lot begged for it. And he says, Imalta na shama, let me run there. Please, the Gematria of na is 51. Rashi says, because it was really settled only 51 years. The other ones were 52 years. So that 1 year made all the difference, which again, I think, and Hashem listened. He was saying it was the newest of the cities. And I think it means the quantity of evil, they didn't devolve into evil in the same way as the other ones. The other ones had to be flipped over and destroyed, but Tzoar was able to be saved. Again, because this idea that Mishpat Hashem, part of the way Hashem judges, it's directing our attention. By using a Gematria, it's directing our attention to the nature of the idea. It's an idea which is highlighting the quantitative aspect of the Mishpat of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Amazing.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
So I actually read the book, and Bensie's gonna borrow it now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm reacting because
He's
I haven't
reacting in
read it
real
yet.
time. I'm like, I know this book
Yeah.
already. but